Hey guys, in today's video we are going to be disassembling and oiling this Honeywell commercial grade 18-inch high velocity floor fan, model HV-180. Now this fan also comes in a pedestal fan version, and also there's a smaller 14-inch version, model HV-140. And I believe the disassembly and oiling procedure should apply to that smaller fan as well. So with these fans, the grills are held on by these integrated hooks on the front grill. They kind of pop over the outer ring on the back grill and kind of hold them in place. There are no screws or any hinged clips that you can undo. So it's supposed to be a little easier, but you just gotta find the right trick to do it. So to undo these hooks, we're going to be using two screwdrivers. As you can see, I've wrapped some electrical tape around the ends to mainly protect the fan's finish, but also to protect the tools themselves. Now in the official instruction manual for this fan, they also mentioned to use two screwdrivers to sort of pry the grills apart, but they didn't really explain it that well, and I didn't really see a good illustration on what they meant by that, so I've been doing some tinkering, and I think I figured out the best method to do it with these two screwdrivers, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Alright, so the goal here is pretty simple. We're going to lift and pull, and by that I mean we're going to use one screwdriver to disengage the hook from the back grill, and we're going to use the other one to pull the front grill away from the back grill. So keep in mind, this is the front of the fan, this is the back of the fan. So we're going to take our first screwdriver, stick it into this slot between the front grill and the back grill. You can see this is the ring that's part of the front grill, this is the ring that's part of the back grill. So we're going to stick our screwdriver in right there, just like that, close to the hook, and we're going to pry it towards the back of the fan to lift the hook away from the back grill. So you see how that lifted off? Now we're going to use the other screwdriver, stick it into the same slot, but on the other side of the hook, and we're going to pry it towards the front of the fan to pull it away from the back grill. Just like that. Now we rinse and repeat and do all the other hooks. There are 8 around the fan, and then the front grill should just pop off. Okay, so I've done about 5 hooks so far, and that was enough to disengage the rest of them. And as you can see, just kind of give it a little bit of a wiggle, and the entire front grill just pops up like that. We are now going to take the blades off of the motor shaft in preparation to take the motor apart and oil it. So this fan has 2 methods of securing the blades to the shaft. There's a grub screw right there, and this E-clip or a C-clip at the end of the shaft. So I think there's an official tool to easily undo these kinds of clips, but I don't have one, so a good alternative is a simple flathead screwdriver. We're going to stick it into the little slot between the shaft and the clip, and we're going to simply twist. This might go flying. Oh, actually that wasn't too bad at all. Okay. So we're going to take this clip off, set this aside in a secure place. Now for the grub screw, we're going to be using a 7/64 Allen key. Now this screw might be pretty tight. Okay, this one was not bad at all. Came out pretty easily, so we're going to use the long end to back this out. And now, ideally, the blades should come off. Okay, but as you can see, it is not coming out, and that's because all the rust on the shaft is basically locking the blades onto the motor shaft. And for that, you might need a special tool. First, we're going to spray some WD-40 onto the shaft just to help break that rust weld loose. So the tool here that we're going to use is a gear puller. Now if you're an automotive enthusiast, I guarantee you probably have one of these lying around in your garage. If not, these were, I think, around 18 bucks on Amazon, so they're not too expensive, especially if you really like the fan. Then it might be a worthy tool to invest in. They're also going to use a little socket. This one I don't really care about, and this one's going to act as a little bumper between the shaft and the pointy tip of the puller. So we're going to loosen the center screw on the gear puller, and then we're going to hook it up onto the shaft just like that, and then we're going to tighten this center screw onto the socket and hand tighten it just to make sure this is all seated correctly and ready to pull. Just like that. Now we're going to hold this tight and tighten this screw up at the top, and this will pull the blades off of the motor shaft. Get snug like that, and then start tightening. This makes this process a super easy task. As you can see, it's already starting to push the shaft through. I suppose what we could do is, once it's sufficiently tightened, just grab it like that and start spinning the blade. And you can see it is working. Now at this point it's loose that I can even just tighten it with my hand. So we're going to do that. There we go. Carefully we're going to loosen this. Take the puller off. Take the socket off. And there we go. Blades are off. Oh, look at all that hair. And look at all that rust. No wonder it's welded on. I'll do a quick vacuuming job around the fan to get rid of all the big dust bunnies. Alright, so we have one more E-clip or C-clip on the motor shaft. We're going to use the same method. Just be careful not to nick the shaft. I have this really dull flat head that I'm going to use. Stick it in there. And there we go. Keep this one safe too. Next we're going to clean up the motor shaft. There's a lot of gunk and built up oil, and there's like, I don't know what this is. There's like some rubbery residue around the grub screw hole. So what we're going to do is take a fine sandpaper, this is 600 grit, and we're going to run the fan. And when it's running, we're going to sand any raised areas off the shaft so that when we pull this motor cover off, it's not going to score the bearing surface. And we're going to have a vacuum cleaner running nearby to catch any of the fine metal dust that it produces. Motor shaft is clean. There's some residue on the surface, but it feels flush, it's super smooth, so now it should be okay to take the motor apart. Alright, so now to take the motor off of the back grille. First of all, I did some light cleaning to get any major large pieces of debris off. We're going to need a 10mm socket. I'm using this ratchet to undo these 4 nuts on the back. So I'm going to start with this one. Take all the little washers off. Now we're going to undo this Phillips head screw. This is Phillips size 2 screwdriver. There should be a screw and a metal washer. Okay, so that came out. This is the plastic cord restraint. Looks like this may have been over tightened at the factory, and partially due to heat cycling it's sort of cracked from the back side. Should be okay though, so we're going to set this aside. And now the cord is free to move. And there's one more nut right behind there that we need to take off. So with that removed, the motor should be free. You can kind of move it around. Now, you don't have to, if you're just looking to oil this fan, you don't have to take the wires off. You can see there are zip ties here that you can undo and take the switch unit apart and pull the whole thing apart. If you want to, you could do that, but in this video I just want to show you guys the bare minimum you need to do to get inside the motor and oil the bearings thoroughly. So you can see now the motor is loose. So what we can do is get a adjustable wrench underneath here. There's a hidden nut right underneath here. And this may be also a 10mm. Yes, it is. Undo this, take all 4 bolts out, and now we should be able to separate the motor. And when you're doing this, keep track of the order of the washers. So when you lift this, you will see that there's a flat washer resting up against the back grill. Keep track of that. There'll be a nut right here, which is what we're trying to take off, and then there's a compression washer there, and then this is an entire bolt that goes through. So we're going to loosen this, and I'll show you guys this in better detail once I take it off. And then this should just push through. Actually, this is like this is stuck enough onto the motor that we can just leave it alone. So the order is that we got the bolt, and then it goes through the motor. There's a nut on the other side. I'm just going to put it back here to keep track of it. And there's a metal washer that rests against the back grill before this bolt goes through to the other side. Okay, rinse and repeat. There's 1, 2, 3 more. Okay, so with all the bolts removed, we should be able to carefully pop the front housing off of the stator core. Okay, so there we go. Has come off. So first of all, we're going to just grab the motor by the shaft and pull this outer housing and the rotor out together straight off. Just like that. Alright, so once we have the front housing and the rotor off, you want to very carefully try to tug on this front housing to see if it will slide off the motor like that. If you encounter any bit of resistance due to any raised spots on the shaft or any debris or gunk, don't force it. Do not hammer anything, do not yank on anything. Pause, take a piece of paper towel, WD-40, clean all the remaining gunk off. If you feel any burrs or any raised surfaces, take that sandpaper, file it down so it's nice and smooth. So it should come out like that. So far so good. Just like that. If it gets stuck or caught on anything, do not force it. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's very important that you do not force anything through, or else the internal surface of the bearing will get scratched, and that will ruin the operation of the sleeve bearing. So there's the rotor. You can temporarily set this aside. Alright, so next step is to clean out the bearing. You see there's probably a lot of old oil residue in there. There's visible dirt and just foreign debris that's in there that we do not want in there. So we're going to clean it out. Just have a piece of paper towel. I'm going to take a section of it. I'm going to roll it up to a little cylinder. Something like that. And we're going to apply a little bit of WD-40 onto it. Trying to get it so it's not spraying onto the fan. And then we're going to twist it up. We're going to put it in the sleeve bearing, and we're going to twirl it around, and it should pick up all that stuff we don't want in there and clean it out. Let me do that. Look at that. That's all the dirt and old oil residue that's in the bearing. Also clean that mating surface in the bearing to make sure there's no residual debris and dirt. Should be nice and clean, bare metal. Just gonna go around, clean the surface. Looks good. And same procedure for the front bearing. So you also want to clean the rotor as well. Remember to take all of these individual washers out. There's maybe 1 or 2 fiber washers usually. This is completely coated in old oil residue. There's one in the back on this fan, one in the front. Just carefully spin that off. And there's some hefty, I think these are nylon. Oh, there's actually a few more. So as you can see, there are a bunch of little washers there. You want to keep track of the order, but carefully pull them off. You want to clean them thoroughly with WD-40 or sometimes isopropyl alcohol. Basically get all of the old oil residue off to make sure they're perfectly clean for fresh oil. And when I was cleaning them, I discovered that this cluster of washers were actually multiple separate ones. So make sure when you're cleaning them, you try to separate them and get all of them clean, because sometimes they get stuck together because of the gunk. Now when it comes to oiling these motors, do you guys see that tan colored fuzzy fabric material between the little gaps in the bearing there? That's the oil wick material. And basically what you want to do is you want to saturate that in addition to applying oil on the bearings themselves, because what that will do is it will soak up the oil and dispense it to the bearing through capillary action for a longer term lubrication. So that's very important. Alright, so now it's time to oil the bearings. Now one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, which oil should I use for fans like these? And for folks here in North America, my answer to that is either 3-in-1 electric motor oil in this blue and white bottle, or ZoomSpout all-purpose turbine oil. Now this particular oil comes in many different brand names. This one happens to be from Supco, but it's basically the same formula. Just make sure it's the all-purpose oil, not the sewing machine oil, because that's a much thinner oil, different formula, and it's just not the best for fans. So I'm using the ZoomSpout oil. For this, I transferred it to a little needle bottle for easier application. So let's get into it. Okay, so I got the fan pointing upwards. We're going to first saturate the oil wicks before we apply it to the bearing itself. Now, what I like to do is, because the oil wicks work through heat and gravity, there's no real point in heavily saturating the wick near the bottom of the bearing, because if you put too much from normal operation, the heat and the gravity, the oil is just going to pool at the bottom and leak out. So what I'm going to do is focus heavily on the upper portion of the wick. That way when the fan warms up and it's running, the oil will be able to saturate downwards and also through the bearing, which is what is important. So this is the top of the fan, this is the bottom of the fan. So we're going to apply oil first on the upper portion of the wick. So I'm going to stick this down there. It might be a little bit hard to show on camera, but I'm basically giving the bottle a good squeeze and apply some oil to saturate the oil wicks. Now I can see it from here. I'm not sure if the camera is going to be able to capture that, but you want to saturate the wick so that it's nice and soaked with oil, but at the same time you don't want to oversaturate it, because that's going to just leak out over time and cause a mess, and that's more of a hassle to deal with later on. So just enough to make the wicks nice and fluffy. Put a little bit towards the bottom as well. Of course we want to saturate it, but just not as much as the top. Once we have that complete, we're going to apply some on the actual bearing itself. And pretty much the same procedure for the front cover as well. So with this one, this is the top, so we're going to focus more on the upper portion of the oil wicks. And also remember, apply oil directly to the bearing surface, just like that. So on the rotor, I got all the washers put back on, but you can see I didn't quite stack them all the way yet. And that's because we're going to apply just maybe a single drop of oil between each of the washers. And that's to allow a little bit of lubrication as the fan runs. Make sure the oil gets between the washers and reduce friction. Doesn't have to be a lot, because as the bearing runs, or the motor runs, it's going to lubricate them anyways, but we want to kind of prime them. We're going to carefully twist them to ensure they're stacked down like that, just like that. And now we're going to apply some oil on the outer surface of the washer. You want to be a little bit more generous with this one, because this is the mating surface against the bearing. Apply some on the motor shaft as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and put the motor back together. So we put a little bit of oil on the rotor, so now this should be able to go back nice and smooth. Be careful when you put the rotor back on that you don't strike the windings. So carefully we're going to line it up. This actually might be easier if you have the fan pointing straight up, but for the sake of the video I'll just do this. There we go, carefully line it up. Now because the back bearing is enclosed, there might be a bit of a pressure, you can see, but give it a little bit of a push, spin it around. Now what I like to do, I don't know if this actually works or not, but to me it seems like it does, is before I continue, once I put the rotor back in, I spin it while I kind of move it in and out. That kind of pushes any little bit of debris that may be in the bearing surface. So I do this, push in and out, rotate, give it a good spin. And now for the front cover, I'm just going to wipe the shaft clean one more time. Apply a little bit more oil. Okay, now we're going to grab our front cover, make sure we remember which side is the top. So this was in this corner, this is top, so we're going to make sure it's lined up. And carefully lower this back on. Notice how it slid down without any resistance, so that's what you want. Line it up. The cover will slightly pop into the stator, just like that. It clips right in, you guys heard that. So now we're good to put the bolts back on. Put it in like that, lift up the motor, thread the nut from the back side by hand, and then the washer, and now it's good to sit against the motor like that. Rinse and repeat for all three. Also keep in mind that one of the bolts will be a little bit longer than the other three, and this is for this corner where the wire goes through, to ensure that the plastic retainer can fit on here, so remember that. Okay, now we're going to tighten the bolts. Same procedure as the disassembly. We're going to hold the nut on the back side with an adjustable wrench while we tighten the bolt with the 10mm socket. Now you don't have to do this, but if you want you can go in like a crisscross pattern like how you do it in automotive. 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Now these bolts, you don't have to crank them down like crazy. If anything, that might do more harm than good. Just tighten it up until it's snug. Give it maybe like a 1/16 or 1/8 of a turn and call that good. You do not want to crank this down to a point where it starts actually crushing the stator stack. That'd be pretty bad. Next we have a single washer and nut going on the back here, and this is on the long bolt. And we're going to do the same thing for all three other bolts. Remember, washer and then bolt. Now we're going to put the cord retainer back on there. This might be a little bit tricky because the material is failing, but oh, that actually wasn't too bad. Okay, so now we're going to thread on our final hex nut right there. We're not going to crank it down just yet because we're going to the other side to secure the Phillips head screw. Make sure it's threading in correctly, not cross-threading. And now we can tighten this. Also, don't tighten this one all the way down either, because it is plastic, like I said. Just go until it's snug. And we are good. And just like that, the motor is now back together. Now the first thing you may notice afterwards is that the motor shaft might be a bit stiff. It's kind of hard to spin it by hand. Feels like there's binding or some resistance, but that's normal. It happens all the time, and that's because the front and the back bearing are sitting inside of a very rigid socket that allows them to pivot, but with a lot of effort. And chances are when you take the motor apart, they got pushed out of alignment slightly. When you put it back together, because they're not in perfect alignment, they are pretty stiff. So what you want to do, it's a very simple trick to get them back into alignment. Take the back end of a screwdriver and firmly give them taps from all directions, something like this. And maybe diagonally as well. Like to tap in a little bit, just from random angles. And already that's freeing up. Spin it again. And look at that, already it's much smoother, coats down for a lot longer, and it feels much easier to spin by hand. Okay, before we put the blades back on, we're going to reinsert this clip back onto the motor shaft. So this one goes on the lower groove right there, so I'm going to kind of align it first, and then I'm going to take this channel lock plier that I've protected with electrical tape, and I'm going to gently clamp this back on. And just like that, simple enough. Next, we're going to align the grub screw hole right there with the grub screw on the blade, and carefully slide the blade to the motor shaft, just like that. And then we're going to tighten the grub screw. Now as we're tightening it, we're going to make sure we can feel that the grub screw is seating properly. So make sure, because now it's getting stuck, so it tells me that it's a little off from the hole. Okay, there we go, it's now going in. Oops. Because we want the grub screw to go into the hole and seat inside of there, not on the motor shaft. Okay, so you can feel a little bit of play there. That's good. Continue tightening. Allow the grub screw to sit into its groove. There we go. Just like that. Now we take the short end like this, and I'm going to crank it down. Now you don't need to go crazy with this, but obviously tighten it enough that the blades are not just going to come flying off as the fan's running. So about the same tightness as it was when you took the fan apart. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to put our final clip back on. Back into place. Alright, so last step is to put the front grille back on. Same procedure, but just in reverse. We're going to first line up, we're going to start with the bottom pegs, or the hooks I guess. Line like the first few up. And also I'm going to line up the one on the left, because that one's kind of tricky to get. So line that up, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Alright, so far I've got 5 out of 8 hooks back on. So I'll show you guys how I'm going to do this. So you just need one screwdriver for this. All you do is stick it into the gap, lift it so you can clear the hook over the back grille, like so. And after that, use your hand to basically clamp them together, and then release. Just like that. That's actually easier putting it back together. Okay, so once you get all of the remaining hooks back on, that's it. That's the entire procedure on how to disassemble, oil, and reassemble a Honeywell HV-180. Let's test it on high. I'm about to suck this in. Too much power. Alright guys, well that concludes this video, a little tutorial on how to take apart and oil one of these commercial grade Honeywells, the 18-inch and also the 14-inch. That's a pretty good spin down. Might need to break in a little bit because the motor's been freshly serviced. But there it is guys, hope it helped, thanks for watching, and as always I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.